Welcome to the Julie Briggs Show on WMTR 1250 AM, a Beasley Media Group station, brought to you by www.insidernj.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey. Streaming live on WMTRAM.com and TalkStreamLive.com.
Congresswoman MiIkie Sherrill, serving the 11th District, joins us this morning. Welcome, Congresswoman MiIkie Sherrill.
Thanks so much for having me, Julie.
Congresswoman Sherrill, if you can take a moment and reflect on your accomplishments this year.
Well, it's been quite a year, and I think one of the things that I'm so happy about is the fact that we have just gotten, just this week, shovels in the ground on the Tunnelly Ave Bridge project for the Gateway Tunnel. As you may recall from some of our probably past conversations, I've been fighting for Gateway since I got into Congress. So to see this actually starting is so important. We know it'll return $4 into our economy for every $1 we spend. This is going to be one of the nation's most significant infrastructure projects that we have completed. And it's really going to, I think, help so many families, both with their quality of life, but also getting in and out of the city for jobs. And it's going to make a huge economic difference here and expand a lot of job opportunities. So the Gateway Tunnel project is certainly one. I think we've also been working hard on flooding. Families, their biggest asset is usually their homes. And so protecting our downtowns, protecting our homes, making sure we take the cost not only off the backs of small municipalities, but also their taxpayers has been important to me. So I sat down less than 2 years ago with a group of our mayors to talk about Whippany River flooding and what they needed, what kind of support I could provide to them. And so we were able to get a community project grant, and we're really starting to address the de-snagging, de-silting of the Whippany, the feasibility study, and getting the Army Corps engaged as well. So that's been something that we've really moved forward on that I'm really pleased to report. And then, of course, as always, and I'll say this today, but then I am not going to praise the Army for the rest of the week because we have the big Army-Navy football game coming up next weekend. So I will be very competitive, but I will say that I'm really thrilled with all of the funding we've been able to get for Picatinny Arsenal. It really powers our New Jersey economy up here. It's one of the biggest employers in NJ11. It supports a vast defense base. It bolsters the local economy. We drive in billions of dollars on the different projects that base handles. And it's also a critical thing for our national defense. 90% of the munitions that we've sent over to Ukraine were developed right here at Picatinny Arsenal. So I'm really proud to support the men and women who work there. And then that really supports our economy in the area.
And can you tell us, Congresswoman Sherrill, about your biggest priorities for 2024?
Sure. It's just a constant desire of mine to make New Jersey a better and more affordable place to live and work and raise a family. So that's how I focus what I'm addressing in the legislation. How can I make it easier on families? How can I, help them afford the cost of living here? How can I bring that down? So that's why I'm really focusing on things like making sure that we address the child care shortage. It not only helps our families. I don't think any family should have to pay more than 7% of their income in child care costs. We have, we do child care roundtables, and I've heard from people that they're paying more than their mortgage in child care costs. So really bringing that down for families. I've been focused on that, and I'm going to continue to fight for that. I also have a bill that is expanding access to high impact tutoring. We know a lot of our kids have suffered learning loss because of COVID, and we don't want to see any child kind of pay a price for that throughout their life. So we need to make sure that all the kids that sort of feel like they're not doing well in school, they're kind of checking out, get the support that they need. And we've studied this, and one of the best ways to do that is to have these tutors that are connected to the school, the same person meeting day after day, week after week, really getting invested in these young people, helping to mentor them through the process, and that can have a huge impact. And so that's a bipartisan bill that I've introduced. And then really making sure that we are addressing all of the things, around healthcare and getting better healthcare outcomes, bringing down the price of that as well, and making sure that people have access to that, and really just, I think, focusing on those issues to bring costs down for families and to make life a little bit easier for everyone.
We have former Senator Loretta Weinberg on, but first we'll go to John Graham.
Thank you. First of all, what a very talented honor to have Loretta Weinberg on, and Deb and Tom Barrett and Fred and also Larry. And what a great panel this is. And Congresswoman, I want to ask you a question. As you know, Friday, what happened was the Israel and Hamas situation took a pretty bad turn here in the New York Times when it indicated that Israel knew 1 year in advance, possibly, of this attack was going to happen. And my question to you is this a 9/11 situation, or is this maybe something more sinister politically going on there that we're not aware of? Because actually right now, the way it is being put out there in the media is that somebody knew something more and they did nothing about it, more on purpose, not in terms of that they were caught off guard. Do you have anything you want to discuss about this or bring it up at all to the people in New Jersey? It's your call.
I think it appears to just be a huge intelligence failure by Netanyahu and his government. And, I think that's what worries so many of us about having him now at the helm. The decisions he's making, what part of the decision is he making to try to distract Israelis from the one really unforgivable sin of anyone in power in Israel? And that's compromising the security of Israel, and how much is, based on a thoughtful strategy. And right now, I think what we in the national security community have been saying, what Secretary Blinken's been saying, what the president's been saying, what the CIA director's been saying is we need to understand the strategy here for Gaza. What is your end goal? How are we going to get the hostages released? And then how are we going to get to a better future? And Israel has not been able to lay out that strategy. And, I think many of us feel very strongly about this because, quite frankly, we in the United States made some mistakes going forward. We enunciated that we were going to have a war on terrorism. That's not a winnable war. It's a laudable goal, but it's not a military strategy. It doesn't have, an end goal. It doesn't help you determine strict military procedures and planning and strategies and tactics. And so I think, many of us are very worried that we haven't heard enunciated what Israel's plan is. Eradicating Hamas is, I think we all believe that they need to not be in power, but what is the strategy? What is the military strategy? And I very much hope, even though, it's understandable because, of course, Hamas ended the humanitarian pause with not, with the rockets and stuff, but really, I think, again, starting up the hot war is not leading to where we need to go in the region.
Yeah, but we're also funding Israel, and that's part of the whole problem. We're giving them all this money, millions of dollars. Are we funding Netanyahu for making these kinds of decisions that are not fundamentally in sync with the U.S. policy? Are we not working with them, MiIkie? What do you think there, Congresswoman?
Well, I think we have to be in sync because I think this is about more than simply a conflict between Israel and Hamas. Mm-hmm. We know that Hamas has gone to meet with Putin. We know that Iranian drones, the same Iranians who are funding Hezbollah to the north of Israel, are in Ukraine. We know that there have been dozens and dozens of attacks by Iran on U.S. forces and personnel in the last several months. We know Houthis are getting involved as well. Mm-hmm. We know China we've seen a huge surge in anti-Semitism, much of it coming from TikTok, controlled by China and ByteDance, their parent company. So I think this is really shaping up to be a much larger conflict. And so making sure that we understand the strategies and that we understand how we are going forward is important, not just for the security of Israel, but I think for the security of the United States and democracies across the world.
And Senator Loretta Weinberg joins us.
Yes, thank you very much, Julie. And thank you, Congresswoman, for being able to articulate what's correct and what needs even more correction in terms of what's going on right now between Israel and Hamas and the Palestinians. I come from a very diverse area. The town in which I live, I boastfully say we have everything from a mikveh to a mosque right within the borders of the community of Teaneck. And of course, the diversity, which is wonderful and which we celebrate, leads to other problems from time to time. So navigating what we are doing, and we, the United States, what we should be doing, what those of us who were American Jews feel passionately, is not always an easy road. And I think we need more of the kinds of clear explanations that you just gave to the radio audience and to the rest of us on the panel of what our strategies should be and where they're lacking. So I appreciate that, and I encourage whatever platforms you have to continue with those kinds of explanations or education of our population. And now to change the subject just a little, of course, I am most interested in women's voices and in the reaction of our legislature and our courts to the issues that are important to mothers and grandmothers and sisters and aunts right here in New Jersey. So I'm wondering if you could comment on what you think is going on in terms of the Supreme Court, and if you've got anything you'd like to share with us, and in terms of the voices in Congress to hopefully protect a woman's right to choose and access to health care.
Well, yeah, I'm so glad you raised that because, these are issues that are near and dear to my heart, of course. And, I'd be interested, Senator Weinberg, as you've fought for these things for your career and been such a champion for women and have seen, many changes go on over the years, I'd be interested in your thoughts. But certainly, it's been horrible to see Roe overturned. And it's been horrible because we have these outcomes like having service women being stationed in places like Texas, which I was, I was given orders to Corpus Christi, Texas for flight school. And, as I jokingly say sometimes to people who've not served, they're called orders, not suggestions. So, if you're a young woman from New Jersey and say, oh, I don't want to go to Texas, they don't have good reproductive health care, that's not really a choice you have when you have enlisted or when you're serving.
Wow.
So you get sent to Texas. If you're in Corpus Christi, I think the nearest place you can get an abortion is about a 10-hour drive. You're making probably, as a young enlisted person, maybe $450, $500 a week. That would cost you a week's pay at least just to get there, much less to stay there and get an abortion. So, that's why when we could not provide those services on base, we allowed women money from the DOD, the Department of Defense, to travel and to have leave and to assure that they had leave. And that is why Senator Tuberville's been holding up all military promotions for admirals and generals. And we were successful. Somebody tried to put that into law, and we were successful in stripping that out of the National Defense Authorization Act, so they couldn't implement a travel ban there. And we're still working hard to end Tuberville's hold. So it is an awful outcome that now that Roe's been overturned and you don't have those basic protections. But for so many of us, for so many years, those protections were the floor. And yet we never seemed to get beyond the floor. In fact, that very floor seemed to get, eroded over time until it felt like we were all in the basement maybe. We weren't making progress. And now I think that Roe's been overturned and people have really had to come to terms with what a world without Roe actually looks like and the dangers that they themselves face at their reproductive age or that their children face, or, as you're looking at your family or your wife or other things. I think people are really reckoning with how dangerous this world can be for women. And so I think that's why you see across the country in some of the most red places, people coming together and saying this is not appropriate and that we should have better protections. And then the good news is we're also looking beyond that. So we're not just looking at trying to keep these very minimal reproductive health protections under Roe, but we're looking at how can we make women's health better. And so we have now now, over-the-counter contraception. Why did it take us forever to get over-the-counter contraception? We're looking at prescriptions for a year, not just 2 months. I mean, anyone who's been on birth control understands that, trying to get to the pharmacy all the time or trying to get your prescription again. And, if you miss this a little, you might have some unintended consequences. So, why has it taken us so long to address some of these really basic things? But of course, we're continuing to see this huge disconnect between where people are and where these largely male older legislators are, who really don't have any fundamental understanding of how reproductive health works. And you just hear some of the comments that are kind of mind-boggling. But I'll just tell you, Senator Weinberg, what we're not seeing too much movement in the courts right this second, but we're seeing in legislative bodies, moderate Republicans seeing what a bad issue this is for them and starting to really push back. So we're starting to see a revolt in the GOP in Washington. They have already voted on quite a few very bad pieces of legislation for women, but they are now kind of refusing to go forward with more, which I hope means that we can come to a better agreement on how we can protect women's rights going forward.
We are talking to Congresswoman MiIkie Sherrill. We'll be right back.
John Graham, founder and CEO of Fairview Insurance Agency Associates, has been providing excellent service for the people of New Jersey since 1970. Fairview Insurance is a premier family-owned and operated independent full-service insurance agency based in Verona and Cherry Hill, New Jersey, working on behalf of individuals, companies, and public entities providing customized insurance plans, employee benefits, investment, and financial planning services. Fairview holds more than 30 licenses to service clients' needs in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York, as well as nationally through specialty insurance programs for hard-to-place risks. Fairview Insurance Agency's knowledge of the industry, cohesiveness, and deep commitment to values have inspired confidence among their many thousands of clients. Fairview Insurance Agency Associates, Verona, New Jersey will win your trust.
For the latest up-to-date news, visit www.insidernj.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey, featuring politicians, attorneys, medical, celebrities, and people and issues in the news.
Fairview Insurance Agency, 25 Fairview Avenue in Verona. Find them online at fairviewinsurance.com.
Welcome back to the Julie Briggs Show, brought to you by www.insidernj.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey.
Welcome back, Tom Barrett.
Congresswoman, if I may, first I want to actually congratulate you on what I think are signature achievements, the Gateway Tunnel and the flood mitigation, which you were well aware of in Milburn and that area. And all in all, your child care efforts and your affordability, your dedication to the affordability issues, all deserve kudos. So you certainly have my vote in that regard. But I want to ask you two questions. One having to do with what you were just saying about women's health care. I will often liken the stupidity of the Supreme Court decisions on Roe to be commensurate with trying to take gumdrops away from a grizzly bear. I mean, the idea that they woke up women to the point where they just refused to accept that kind of erosion of their basic rights was a worldwide wake up as far as I was concerned. And I'm wondering what impact it's going to have on the 2024 elections, especially because I boil it down to, I really do think what the Democrats have going into the 2024 elections, both in Congress and for the presidency, is two issues. One, women's reproductive freedom rights, and Donald Trump. And the idea, the irony is that in the face of all this, Trump, and it's being as stubborn as he possibly can be, is now calling for kind of a renewed push to replace Obamacare if he should win his second term. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts in terms of what the impact of all that's going to be, at least in terms of where millions of people will lose their health insurance and seniors and families across the country face exorbitant costs just to stay healthy. And his platform is going to include the potential to reopen the contentious fight over the Affordable Care Act. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah. So I guess I don't feel like I have to guess what 24 could look like with respect to choice, because I think we saw, what 23 just looks like. We had a lot of members of the New Jersey Republican Party who really thought they were going to do quite well in these elections and in fact did quite poorly. And many of the races that were surprisingly successful were largely communicating on choice. And, you saw the commercials and the mailers and stuff. And so I think this just seems to be such a disconnect between where the electorate is and where some legislators are. And it seems like they're having trouble with that disconnect in the Republican Party.
Right.
And I'll tell you, like I said, it's finally, just after these November elections, we're finally seeing some Republicans in Washington start to balk a little bit at taking women's rights away. So I think the damage is done because they voted on some really egregious legislation for nationwide abortion bans, for travel bans, etc. And so I think the damage might be done for 24. What I'm hoping is we see some candidates come forward in the Republican Party who are pro-choice, because I just would hate for this issue to get to the point of this sort of gun issue, for example, where the majority of the electorate is pro some measure of gun safety, at least background checks, and you just can't get anyone in the Republican Party to really move credibly on it. I'm hoping we don't get to that bright line. We've been there, but I hope that this is seen as, when you see in places like Ohio and Kansas what the results have been, I hope that the Republican Party moves on this. But I think for 24, we're still going to see the fallout from some of their really bad votes and policies. And then as far as the Affordable Care Act, it'll be interesting when we passed the Affordable Care Act, and then there was about 10 years of fighting over it. It was a very potent issue until they got the ability, with the majority in the Senate and the House and the presidency, when they had the ability to actually take the Affordable Care Act away, I think they realized that was not actually, it was popular to run against the Affordable Care Act for some reason, but not to actually legislate against it. So the Republicans backed off, and we haven't really seen attacks on it since that time. I'm hoping we don't go back to those battle days, because let's face it, we still need to do better by people across this country with respect to healthcare and affordability of healthcare. And so we've tackled and addressed some things, but I'd love to be able to continue to move forward. We've moved forward in the last Congress on things like insulin pricing, on negotiating drug pricing, which will really bring costs down. So I would hate to waylay those efforts of really continuing to address affordability and get caught up in the sort of fight over whether or not to have the Affordable Care Act, which, just leaves us not addressing real problems of people across the country.
Deborah Kornavaca.
Thank you, Julie. Good morning, Congresswoman. A delight to hear from you, and also to hear about the things that are moving forward and progress we are making, since so many of the headlines really talk about the dysfunction. But I fear that the question I have may touch on some of the dysfunction there, and I hope you can give us reason for optimism. We are living on somewhat of a prayer with our continued resolutions for the federal budget, and I believe, if my dates are correct, you have to come back in January and begin the process to hopefully resolve our budget to allow us to move forward with some stability and predictability. I'm wondering, if I'm right about that, where do you see the outcome? How do you see us resolving it in ways that we haven't been able to up until now? And what are the main things that you'll be fighting for to make sure they remain in the budget?
Well, thanks, Deb. Thanks for the question. I felt like this was a hard exam question from from the NJEA. Outline the dysfunction in Congress and give us hope for optimism. Okay, here I go. Let's see. So, this has been a breathtakingly dysfunctional Congress to date. And we were just sort of talking in the green room before the show started about the new speaker. And he does come from the extremist part of the party, and yet he does seem to want to govern and want to compromise, which is kind of shocking, really. I didn't see that coming. So that is my optimism. That is the hope I have. The fact that he came in, he passed the continuing resolution to keep the government open, which is what, when McCarthy did it with Democratic help, he was, they vacated the chair. They kicked him out of the speaker's chair. So he did it. He needed Democratic help, but the far right didn't really say much. They kind of let it go, because I think the level of dysfunction was such and so miserable for the GOP that, they don't want to go back there. I hope. I'm kind of knocking on wood here. So yes, we do have there's two different dates for some of the budget, the appropriations that we need to get passed. The first is January 19th and the second is February 2nd. So I think the sense is that we are now, negotiating, and they're not, the initial appropriations bills that were being passed out of the House were really partisan, loaded up with just a bunch of amendments that were just really not acceptable to Democrats, so they weren't going to get any bipartisan votes. And that was strikingly different from what the Senate was passing. The Senate was passing, a bunch of bipartisan appropriations bills. So now the House seems to have gotten on board. There's a lot of work, but there's a lot of work to be done. And it's sort of a race against the clock to get those bills done because the Speaker said he does not want another continuing resolution. He wants to pass these appropriations bills. I think we can largely get there, but time is of the essence. We have a couple more weeks in session before the holidays, and then, we'll get back to work. So, we really need to make sure that before the holidays, we get some of the directives to get those done and hopefully pass those. What I'm more worried about is the supplemental. That is the funding for Ukraine, Israel, and Indo-PACOM, the Pacific Theater, and the humanitarian aid in Gaza and across the world.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman MiIkie Sherrill, for joining us. And we hope that you have a wonderful holiday season and you will be back again soon for an update.
Well, it's always such an interesting panel. I have to echo John Graham. You did get an extra special one today. It was really an honor to be on with everybody. I hope all of you have a great holiday too. And thanks again, Julie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
I'm Julie Briggs. We'll be right back.
John Graham, founder and CEO of Fairview Insurance Agency Associates, has been providing excellent service for the people of New Jersey since 1970. Fairview Insurance is a premier family-owned and operated independent full-service insurance agency based in Verona and Cherry Hill, New Jersey, working on behalf of individuals, companies, and public entities providing customized insurance plans, employee benefits, investment, and financial planning services. Fairview holds more than 30 licenses to service clients' needs in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York, as well as nationally through specialty insurance programs for hard-to-place risks. Fairview Insurance Agency's knowledge of the industry, cohesiveness, and deep commitment to values have inspired confidence among their many thousands of clients. Fairview Insurance Agency Associates, Verona, New Jersey will win your trust.
For the latest up-to-date news, visit www.insidernj.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey, featuring politicians, attorneys, medical, celebrities, and people and issues in the news.
Fairview Insurance Agency, 25 Fairview Avenue in Verona. Find them online at fairviewinsurance.com.
Welcome back to the Julie Briggs Show, brought to you by www.insidernj.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey.
Welcome back. Joining my political roundtable this morning, former Senator Loretta Weinberg served the 37th District, Bridgegate investigator, Democrat. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie.
John Graham, DNC National Leadership Committee and publisher of InsiderNJ.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie.
Tom Barrett, Insider NJ columnist, independent. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie.
Larry Kasha, Republican State Committeeman, attorney, Kasha and Evans. Thank you so much.
Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks.
Deborah Kornavaca, Associate Director of Government Relations for NJEA, Democrat. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie. A pleasure and an honor to be here.
And Fred Snowflake, journalist for InsiderNJ.com, independent. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I am here.
In a historic vote, the House voted to expel George Santos from Congress. Your thoughts, John Graham?
Well, if anyone deserves to be expelled, it's him. The interesting part of this whole scenario up there, Tom Barrett and I were discussing with Fred this morning, was what's going to happen with the other parts of the district up there? Is it going to go Democratic, and does it bring the House closer together now that he's out of there? I think the Republicans made a smart move getting rid of him. He did not help them. By the way, there were over 100 Republicans who voted for him to be expelled. And then
it was bipartisan.
Yeah, it was. But mostly the Democrats, really. I mean, it was the Democratic move as well. But taken away from that, it's a disgrace that we elect people as Liz Cheney said, Fred and I were up in Morristown and listened to Liz Cheney at a special event that she was the headliner for. And she said, do not elect idiots. And she's right. Don't elect any idiots. And she was telling everyone to run for office out there in this audience. Yeah,
that's
good,
the
Fred.
new bar, John.
Yeah, that's true, Senator. But
Senator,
don't elect idiots. Yeah, go ahead.
Senator
John, along those
Weinberg.
lines,
Good, Loretta.
Well, that's a good axiom. Do not elect idiots.
Yeah.
But I was reading a little bit about Sandra Day O'Connor, of course, and her passing today and the tributes and
this
so
week.
on. One of the things that she continually emphasized during her career was teaching civics in school.
Yes.
And maybe we have to make sure that that is being done in our curriculum here in New Jersey, so that by the time a young person graduates from high school, they have a rudimentary understanding of their government, how they're governed, and why it's important not to elect idiots.
Deborah Kornavaca.
Well, I think I took some solace in two things. The first is that there is some hope for bipartisan action in the federal governing body there, which is not known to be particularly collegial these days. And the second is that there is a bottom. Apparently we have defined something which enough Democrats and Republicans can stand up for in unison and say, this is not acceptable. Now, it's a very, very low bottom, but we're not in a free fall because they have set a boundary and said this is unacceptable. And that gives me a slight ray of hope, even amidst, reading the allegations and just shaking my head that clearly this idiot and liar and criminal. I mean, the behavior is unbelievable, was elected in the first place. So I am somewhat hopeful.
That's right.
Larry Kasha, what does this mean for the already thin Republican majority?
Well, in all candor, we're probably going to lose that seat. It was a Democrat seat for the longest time, and then he came along and he basically lied to the public about who he was. So let's face it, the only political currency that the normal person has is their vote, and when they basically spend that political currency at the polls, they expect to get what they are spending it on. And in his particular case, they were not. I mean, he was a fraud. And I couldn't have been happier to see him go because the long and short of it is we rely on our elected officials to have some sense of integrity. He had absolutely none, to the point of being delusional in his activities and the way he conducted himself. He had to go. Now, the 114 votes to keep him there we're basically there because they're saying, well, now we have even a slimmer majority than we had before. And the way New York handles replacement of an elected official on that level is different than New Jersey. Hochul, the governor of New York, is going to replace him in the short term, and then there's going to be a whole new election. Whereas in New Jersey, if that were to happen, the political party that's in power in that particular district replaces that person for the balance of the term. So in essence, they'd be running again, but they'd be running as an incumbent. So, to answer your question, if there's a good possibility that we're going to lose that seat, I don't want to see that happen, but I think it's more important that we have integrity in government because it's so lacking that there are so many folks out there, so many constituents out there that just don't believe in the political process anymore. And I think this is one way of maybe injecting just a little bit of life in it so that people have a little more confidence.
Good point.
Brett Snowflake.
No, getting back to what Larry said, I mean, I think it's fairly obvious that if George Santos was still around, he would have lost the seat next year anyway. So now whatever Republican runs, obviously it is a Democratic district, but whatever Republican runs would have at least some, in theory, a better chance to win. I mean, that's the politics of it. But besides the partisan politics, I mean, look, people joke about politicians at times not being 100% honest. But I mean, you remember, gentlemen, ladies, he quickly became a butt of jokes just about as soon as he got into office, I guess. And really, the amazing thing is that he lasted this long.
Tom Barrett.
There's a few ironies here. One, I don't know when's the next time, let alone when was the last time we saw the New Jersey congressional delegation vote in unanimity. I think all 3 Republicans and all 9 Democrats, I think, voted for his expulsion, which is a little bit ironic because speaking of electing idiots, George Santos played the voters for idiots. I mean, that's the real irony here. So I think his sentence was merited. I think Governor Hochul had it right. He was just occupying space.
Donald Trump still retains a 40-point lead over the other Republican candidates. What do you say?
As I mentioned to the Congresswoman before, I really think what the Democratic Party has going in a major way for it in 2024 is two things: the women's reproductive freedom and Donald Trump. And as long as Donald Trump is the nominee, and I assume this is what the Biden reelection efforts is gambling on, is Trump being the nominee, I have a hard time personally understanding how Donald Trump should be allowed on the ballot, having been indicted for 91 counts and being impeached twice, why he should even be a nominee. But nevertheless, the likelihood is that he will be. And unless Nikki Haley, with her big supposedly new donor attraction, is the last gasp effort of the Republicans, I believe Donald Trump will be the nominee.
Can Nikki Haley take the lead?
We are now in second place in Iowa, second place in New Hampshire, and second place in South Carolina. We just have one more fellow we got to catch up to.
Don't underestimate Nikki Haley right now. I know it. Look, we got a year to go, but if she does finish second in both of those states with the Koch brother money behind her, and if somehow she does what Joe Biden did down in South Carolina and can take her former state where she was the governor and somehow fight it or win it, I mean, that would be a colossal upset. Then she could do it.
The one thing I think we haven't talked about here is the real potential of a brokered convention, which we really haven't had since Goldwater. There are a number of folks out there I'd be willing to bet part of my anatomy on that will be delegates. And if Trump is convicted of a crime, not something that's going on in New York, if he's convicted of a crime, there are going to be some delegates who will refuse to vote for him as the nominee in the Republican Party at the convention. Now it goes to a brokered convention. So there is the possibility that even if Trump wins the majority of the primaries, he still might not get the nomination.
We have to go to a break. I'm Julie Briggs. We'll be right back.
John Graham, founder and CEO of Fairview Insurance Agency Associates, has been providing excellent service for the people of New Jersey since 1970. Fairview Insurance is a premier family-owned and operated independent full-service insurance agency based in Verona and Cherry Hill, New Jersey, working on behalf of individuals, companies, and public entities providing customized insurance plans, employee benefits, investment, and financial planning services. Fairview holds more than 30 licenses to service clients' needs in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York, as well as nationally through specialty insurance programs for hard-to-place risks. Fairview Insurance Agency's knowledge of the industry, cohesiveness, and deep commitment to values have inspired confidence among their many thousands of clients. Fairview Insurance Agency Associates, Verona, New Jersey will win your trust.
For the latest up-to-date news, visit www.insidernj.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey, featuring politicians, attorneys, medical, celebrities, and people and issues in the news.
Fairview Insurance Agency, 25 Fairview Avenue in Verona. Find them online at fairviewinsurance.com.
Welcome back to the Julie Briggs Show, brought to you by www.insidernj.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey.
Welcome back. The pause for hostage release is over in Gaza and the war continues. Here's Anthony Blinken.
I made clear that after the pause, it was imperative that Israel put in place clear protections for civilians and for sustaining humanitarian assistance going forward. And as we've seen just today, Israel's already moved out on parts of that, including sending out information, making it clear where people could be in safe areas in Gaza. And we'll be looking at that going forward. It's very, very important. It's also important to understand why the pause came to an end. It came to an end because of Hamas.
Your thoughts on this as the war continues, Senator Weinberg?
I think Anthony Blinken just spelled it out in those few short sentences, that if the United States believes that Israel is doing what it can do to protect civilians, that it's a great step forward. None of us here or anybody that I know wants to see innocent civilians killed in warfare, and his obviously attributing to Hamas the breakdown in the pause. So I think the United States has been very clear. Israel has a right to protect itself. It was subject to the most horrendous kind of raid on innocent civilians in the October battle that took place. And to know that today there are still babies and children held hostage, that is beyond the understanding or compassion that any of us can feel for this enemy. So Hamas needs to be removed, and hopefully we need to renew the call for a two-state.
John Graham.
Well, I agree with Loretta. That's a noble cause to try to remove Hamas, but someone has to convince me that could happen. Even MiIkie said it's dealing with a terrorist group trying to remove them is extremely difficult. The problem I have is if Israel knew this a year in advance with the Mossad, and they had the most interesting, brilliant intelligence network in the world, they do. Matter of fact, our network over here in New York City, the police and Israel are tied together in information and in terms of dealing with, like, after 9/11. Did we get caught off guard? We don't get caught off guard again. Why did they get caught off guard? And I still have a rough time with that. When I was over there and met with Mayor Ron Hodey from Tel Aviv, we had dinner together, Jane Barr, my partner and I, and it was during the holidays, the Jewish holidays. But he indicated about Netanyahu, he had no trust in Netanyahu. As a matter of fact, he felt all Jews should come back and live in Israel. He said, I wish they'd all come and live here. But he said, we have so many problems around the world. This is back then. This is like 4 years ago saying it. And then I had that horrible feeling when he said to me, John, I'm not sure if Israel's going to make it. I'm not sure. And this is a man, listen to me, everyone, this is important. This is a man who led during the 6-Day War the Israeli Air Force and helped win that war. And he's a tough guy. I mean, he's a tough guy. And to sit with him, to hear him say that, and his distrust for Netanyahu, which leads me to believe what happened with the West Bank with all these settlements being built. I've seen them being built. I was there. I looked at them and saw them. What is going on there that this was allowed to happen down there at the Gaza region? That should never have been. So there's something that doesn't feel right about it. I'm not saying that Netanyahu knew it or they understood it, but why wasn't that taken care of? We wouldn't be in this situation. And by the way, it jeopardizes international freedoms right now and relationships and everything else, that war. So we have to pay attention more and more that this gets resolved and gets resolved in the right way for the Israeli people.
The New York Times says Netanyahu knew about the attack for a full year. Your thoughts, Tom Barrett?
I just wanted to. I want to point out something that John it's a very insightful point of view that John's making about intelligence failure, because I think the irony here is that going forward, the eradication of Hamas probably depends on Israeli intelligence or worldwide intelligence or American intelligence, because I think it's going forward. I don't know how they do it, confusing the humanitarian efforts with the military efforts in Gaza, and the civilian casualties and everything else. It seems to me that the world's going to have to look at this from a point of view of how we eradicated, some of the other terrorist groups in the Mideast, because especially going forward, carpet bombing and everything else isn't going to actually work. But I'm intrigued by what Tony Blinken said. There's a parsing of words here about causing and ceasefire. And I think that, I get the Israelis' point of view when they any calls for a ceasefire seems to be a call for Israel to surrender to Hamas, which is, totally unacceptable. But yet they're constantly using this word a pause as opposed to a ceasefire. So the parsing of those words in diplomatic terms, it seems to me becoming very important. But I think this failure, the intelligence failure, is going to be haunting not just to Netanyahu, but all of us, because of the tactics that are going to be used going forward. Eliminate Hamas, to me, depends on Israeli and American intelligence forces and special forces.
Larry Kasha, should there be a two-state solution?
Good question.
Well, obviously, the Palestinians need a state. But, if I can just backpedal for a few moments. we have to realize that Hamas is never going away. It might change its name. It was known as the PLO at one time, if you remember Yasser Arafat years ago. And the posture that Israel took at that time was they would not negotiate when there were hostages. If we remember back when El Al, their airline, was being hijacked all the time, they took we're not going to negotiate posture. And after a while, it stopped. Now what's happening is for every one Israeli or hostage that's being given back to Israel, they're giving up 20, 30 people. What that does is it just gives a map for any group that is going to replace Hamas to use in the future. And let's face it as well. Israel, I believe, needs to be more surgical when it comes to going after the militants that crossed the border and committed the atrocities that they committed. What that's doing, quite honestly, it's creating an army of dissidents in the Palestinian communities that's going to go under a different name in the future, because the children that are losing parents right now and their classmates are only going to have anger that's going to surface in some other way in the future with a different name.
Deborah Kornavaca, what are your thoughts of Benjamin Netanyahu's future?
Slim to none, and I say that with both my opinion looking at the facts that we see today and also my hope, because I think the time has passed for him to be an effective leader, if he was one, and to get us past the problems that we're in, it will require new leadership. And I think that his domestic and international failures are manifesting themselves in these tragedies today. If Jews do not feel that Israel is safe, then they have no reason for their leader to be there. That is such a tantamount fundamental piece of identity. And for us to get to safety and security, it may be that two-state solution. And he is not a leader who I believe can help be part of any kind of solution at this point. Although he may be doing what is necessary right now to defend Israel's security, we wouldn't be here if not, I believe, for a lot of what has happened under his leadership.
Fred Snowflake.
I want to talk about the intelligence. I guess it'd be interesting to see what really happened. Presumably, I'm just presuming because we don't know that. I guess that intelligence came from the field and one of the higher ups probably just didn't believe it. It may be a problem of negligence and not anything more sinister than that. And I mean, not that that's good. It's still bad that no one believed it. But still, that's a growing problem. I also know what Larry said about, Israel exchange hostages disproportionately. They give up many more prisoners than they get back. But I kind of think don't you think, Larry, that's a humanitarian decision that the Israelis make in a situation like this?
Oh, I think they want to empty their jails.
Yeah, well, maybe that too. But
it's also going to have future consequences, though, because now it's a roadmap for future terrorists.
Oh yeah, but I don't think that's new. I think this has been going on for a while. So.
Yeah, but Israel didn't negotiate in the past. Now they are.
We have to go to a break. Julie Briggs. Speed Round is next. We'll be right back.
John Graham, founder and CEO of Fairview Insurance Agency Associates, has been providing excellent service for the people of New Jersey since 1970. Fairview Insurance is a premier family-owned and operated independent full-service insurance agency based in Verona and Cherry Hill, New Jersey, working on behalf of individuals, companies, and public entities providing customized insurance plans, employee benefits, investment, and financial planning services. Fairview holds more than 30 licenses to service clients' needs in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York, as well as nationally through specialty insurance programs for hard-to-place risks. Fairview Insurance Agency's knowledge of the industry, cohesiveness, and deep commitment to values have inspired confidence among their many thousands of clients. Fairview Insurance Agency Associates, Verona, New Jersey will win your trust.
For the latest up-to-date news, visit www.insidernj.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey, featuring politicians, attorneys, medical, celebrities, and people and issues in the news.
Fairview Insurance Agency, 25 Fairview Avenue in Verona. Find them online at fairviewinsurance.com.
Welcome back to the Julie Briggs Show, brought to you by www.insidernj.com. Online news for political insiders in New Jersey.
Speed Round is brought to you by Fairview Insurance Agency in Verona and Local 68 operating engineers in West Caldwell and Atlantic City.
Again, Speed Round is brought to you by John Graham, CEO and President of Fairview Insurance Company, Verona, New Jersey. We have lost 3 icons this week. First Lady Rosalind Carter, former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, and former Supreme Court Judge Sandra Day O'Connor. Your thoughts, Senator Loretta Weinberg?
Well, first of all, watching the tribute to Rosalind Carter and listening to her children and grandchildren eulogize her really touched my heart. And I'll sum it up in one phrase where her grandson said she was one fool grandma. And I think that's probably the finest eulogy. That, along with from the U.S. Senator, I believe, her life was a sermon. Contrast that with the loss of Henry Kissinger, who led a long life, and the issues talking about his role in international affairs and diplomatic endeavors really point up the phrase I heard one of my children use recently, the dichotomy of man. Like so many of the rest of us, he was made up of both good and not so good. And with little time passed, I think we will get a better understanding of the role he played. And lastly, Sandra Day O'Connor, who was the first woman appointed to the United States Supreme Court and was a trailblazer in terms of her own tenure of service and her own evolution. So those 3 are history lessons together, and maybe they would be a good starting point for some of our students to have discussions.
John Graham.
First of all, the 3 historical icons, all 3 of them, who contributed to American society like we haven't had before and played a major role. I will tell you one quick story, though. Sandra Day O'Connor, I sat with her for dinner in the archives with she and Ruth Ginsburg on either side of me, and I didn't know what the hell I was in the room for. And I'm sitting there with the 2 of them with Clay Constantino.
You're lucky you got out of the room, John.
Well, Loretta, I have to tell you just quickly, we went up and we looked at them, and so Justice Ginsburg said, come on, take a walk with me and we'll look at these pictures. And she was a tiny, beautiful little woman. I mean, I'm so awed to be with her. But I'm from Jersey and she's from Rutgers. So we go there and we're looking, and Sandra Day O'Connor came up. Then she looks at me and she grabs me by the cheek and she says, "You're a cute young man." And then I went, "Oh, what am I going to say to her?" I said, "Thank you, thank you, Jesse." But that's just correct. Have been in the room with these people and realize, and I'm saying, what am I doing here? But at the same time, I was deeply honored to meet such historical figures during my life in politics. So we're very fortunate to have all 3 of them.
Tom Barrett.
I had the pleasure of actually meeting Rosalind Carter, so she was very special to me as I remember her. But to sum the 3 of them up, I think Henry Kissinger, of course, was, grew up with him as well. Brilliant and complicated, as Loretta said, for sure. Sandra Day O'Connor, I think she was inspirational, especially for what Loretta mentioned before about her advocacy for teaching civics in the public schools. And of course, she was at one point maybe one of the most powerful women in America, certainly most influential, because at the time she was on the Supreme Court and they dealt with issues like abortion and affirmative action, national security, campaign finance, and separation of church and state was another one of her issues. So the 3 personalities, the 3 historical figures were unparalleled, really. But I have a special place for Rosalind Carter, who I had the pleasure of meeting both her and President Carter at one point. So they were all very memorable people to me.
Larry Katcha.
All 3 exceptionally dynamic individuals. Sandra Day O'Connor and Rosalind Carter were, first in their class. When I say that, I mean, you look at Sandra Day O'Connor, who went from getting out of Stanford Law School, couldn't get a job, was put with secretaries at the first firm that she worked at to the Supreme Court. And then we have Rosalind Carter, who, when her husband first got into politics, the condition was that she play an active role, and she was the first lady to have an office that was there not for ceremonial reasons, but to actually get involved with public issues. And then we have Henry Kissinger. Well, Henry Kissinger, there's going to be a lot coming out about Henry Kissinger. Not all of it is going to be complimentary, but you have to appreciate the fact that he came from where he came from over in Europe, and he made a major contribution to the United States, truly the American dream.
Deborah Kornavaca.
Well, I think about these three giants that we've lost, and I agree in the way that especially the women here were first and so gratefully not last. That's one of the things we always tout. But I'm also thinking about their legacies in terms of their work, and Rosalind Carter's work on mental health is still so timely and important. And I hope in remembering her, we lift up what she started, and we know the work is not finished, and we continue that. And when I think of Sandra Day O'Connor and her desire to have civility with colleagues and wanting people to lunch together, to have, conversations, that is something sorely lacking in government, in much of our political and social culture. And I think we could honor her memory by bringing back some of that civility and as the senator said, teaching civics as well. And, for Henry Kissinger, who was one of my father's professors, I think about his legacy in the Middle East and what's happening right now and the role that he had played in the Egypt-Israel. And I think about how so many people have committed so much of their lives to trying to figure that out, and how we still have so much more work to do. So I think we can honor the good in what he's done, but recognize there is things that are not so good, but that the work for all three of them is unfinished. And I hope we remember them by taking away the work we still have to do.
And Fred Snowflake.
Of course, I agree with everyone people said. I think it's worthy to point out the Camp David peace accords. They took place under Jimmy Carter. Henry Kissinger was not around anymore, but he certainly, I think, was certainly instrumental in bringing and making it happen, at least during his tenure. So you got to remember that. And it's also been pointed out by others. All these three individuals were from a political universe that unfortunately is not around anymore. Things are much more collegial in those days. Unfortunately, that's gone. Maybe we'll get it back.
Our time has come to a close. I thank all my political roundtable guests this morning. Senator Loretta Weinberg, thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie, and to your audience too, and everyone a very happy and safe holiday season.
John Graham, thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie. Great panel, and thank you for having such interesting questions and all being brought up today. It was a great honor being on your show, Julie.
Thank you. Tom Barrett, thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie. It's always a pleasure.
Larry Kasha, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Julie. It's always a great opportunity to come on the show. Thank you.
Deborah Kornavaca, thank you so much.
Julie, thank you so much. A pleasure and an honor to be among such incredible guests and have the time for this conversation. Much appreciated.
And Fred Snowflake, thank you so much.
Thank you. Always fun to be here.
And we thank Congresswoman MiIkie Sherrill for starting us off. I'm Julie Briggs. For Jesse Freeze and myself, have a great day.